Mr. Chair. I yield myself 4 minutes at this time.
The gentleman is recognized for 4 minutes.
You know, the American public truly should be outraged when they read the front-page headlines nowadays with regard to bonuses and pay. In the Wall Street Journal today, it's a bank bonus tab of $33 billion. You have to read the second headline, though, to realize that those $33 billion are going to the banks that receive basically the taxpayer bailouts. And at the bottom of the line on all of this is nothing in this legislation that would have actually prohibited this from going forward. Now, the other side of the aisle on the floor today and repeatedly says, well, the Republican side simply has no alternative. It's just the party of no. Well, we know that that's not true. That on the legislation before us today with regard to executive compensation, that both in committee and through rules, Republicans have proposed a number of substantive proposals, which I'll go through right now, that would address the underlying problems that we're trying to address here. So if you permit me, I will now address 3 or 4 major points in this substitute, which would get at these points, I think, that outrages America with regard to compensation, but do so in a fair and just manner. Point 1. In the underlying bill, it allows for a non-binding shareholder vote on executive compensation every year. We propose instead that such a vote should occur every 3 years. Why is that? All the expert testimony we've heard so far says that Wall Street focuses too much on the short term, the year, the 6 month, the 3 quarters, or the end of the quarter. Why then, when compensation packages usually go longer than 1 year, usually go for 3 years, would we be requiring a vote that would once again refocus the attention on 1 year, a short period of time, as opposed to being in line with a 3-year longer time frame? So we suggest that a 3-year vote would be much more appropriate than a 1 year. Secondly, the shareholders in whom we trust with these decisions. We suggest that if we are going to trust the shareholders to be making these decisions, should we not also trust them to make the decision whether or not to have such votes on executive compensation in the future? So our amendment would suggest that a substitute would allow for a 2/3 vote of shareholders to opt out of the shareholder triennial advisory vote if they are so inclined. We know that this is a position taken by a number of institutions, companies in the past, because they said that we do not want to have such power, do not want to involve ourselves in such decision making. And we know that it's right now as well, because we have a letter from the United Brotherhood of Carpenters who point out the very real reason why this is. You know, they hold something like 3,603 different companies in their portfolio. And they said if they were going to have to make this decision either 1 year or every 3 years, and considering their due diligence that they would have to engage in, this commitment will be severely challenged to their fiduciary responsibilities. So if they want to opt out of this, shouldn't we give them that ability if 2/3 of the voters decide to do so? Thirdly, state law. I know the other side of the aisle speaks about state law and hypocrisy on this issue. Should we be preempting state law in this situation? Or those states that have already engaged in this area, should they not be able to speak up and have their voice heard and be not preempted by the federal government? And fourthly, and most importantly, Section 4. This section goes well beyond what the administration has already talked about. The administration says they did not really like what this section is in the bill, and they did not propose this section. So our substitute says that we should be deleting Section 4 of the bill, which would allow government bureaucrats rather than shareholders. The bottom line on this one is, who is it that the other side really trusts to make these decisions? Is it the shareholders, as we saw in the first 3 sections of this bill, to make the decision, that we would suggest they should be in the position to make the decisions? Or is it the bureaucrats that they think should be able to make these decisions? Is it the same bureaucrats who over at the SEC in the past totally missed the whole Madoff situation, that they should be making decisions as opposed to the stockholders? Is it the same bureaucrats who were the regulators for AIG and totally missed that situation? Is that who they trust instead? So we suggest all 4 points are substantive amendments to this, and we would appreciate that, your consideration.
Reserve the balance of his time.
I reserve the balance of my time.
For what purpose?